Hello and welcome to the first in a series of videos which I'm going to look at political ideas for A-level politics. We're going to start with liberalism, and this first video just goes through some of the basics. Right, so looking at some of the core ideas. So the first we're going to look at is human nature. Now essentially liberals are optimistic about human nature. They believe that humans have a huge capacity for progress and to create greater and greater happiness. So they believe in humanity being progressive and getting into a better and better state as time goes on. They also believe essentially that people are rational, that they make decisions based on reason, and it is natural for people to debate, discuss, question whatever they face, and in looking at issues with each other. Liberalism believes that in humans, everybody makes their own path in life. Things are not predetermined. The era initially liberalism comes into is kind of in the early modern period, and people starting to question some of the old ideas about this kind of highly religious societies, where the idea that everyone was in a certain section in society and everything was predetermined and set out for you by a greater power. And liberals turn around and no, actually, we don't believe in predeterminism. We don't believe everything is predetermined. We believe we make our own way, we make our own destiny through our own intelligence and our own work. But one of the things interesting, the other things they do say about human nature is that essentially people are self-interested. People are going to prioritize themselves. They're going to look after their own interests before the interests of anybody else. So generally quite an optimistic, positive view of human nature, but there is that degree, and one of the underlying themes in liberalism is individualism, and that brings a degree of selfishness or self-interest in it as well. So right, so our next one. One of the other kind of key ideas we're going to look at with all the different ideologies is society. Now, liberals believe that within society there are certain natural rights, life, property, and happiness. They expect life to be pleasant, civilized, and long. So they have quite a kind of a positive view of the kind of society that you're going to live in. They believe that individualism and individual freedom are key in any society, that they are kind of the underlying principles, but and that people's rights should not be impinged on by anybody else in society. And if you have a society in which people's rights are impinged on, then that society is not functioning properly. They would see that as a far from ideal society. So an ideal society in the ideas of a liberal is a society where you have individual freedom, that people get on. It's not an idea that everybody is an island and everybody's separate from each other, but that everybody will see things from their own particular point of view. But that kind of self-interest shouldn't lead to imposition or problems for other people. So there's a kind of social contract of things along that line, where people are mindful of how their actions impact on others. Right, now the economic ideas of liberalism are again all to do with freedom, but this time it's to do with freedom of markets. Private property is absolutely front and centre at the heart of the ideas of liberals on the economy, and we will therefore see kind of enshrined in a lot of liberal countries, liberal democracies, ideas of property being strongly protected, most notably, for example, in the First Amendment on the American Constitution. Essentially, liberalism supports capitalism, and one of the kind of key ways that this has been set out is by Adam Smith, and he talks about the invisible hands of the markets ensuring that things were sold at a reasonable price, and that he also talks about trickle-down economics and the idea that whilst you might see the most obvious, it might be a small group in society that seems to be taking the lion's share of the wealth or making the majority of the profit within an economy, that wealth will trickle down to the masses. So liberal economy is one which has very, very few restrictions on it, but liberals believe in this kind of invisible hand of the market, that means that everything has a degree of control, but not imposed by a state or anybody else. Liberalism in terms of the state. Now, essentially, they see the state as a bit like a referee, that it plays an important role resolving clashes between individuals and ensuring things are done fairly. The government or state is there to guarantee and protect rights, and we'll see things like bills of rights in a liberal democracy, and that the government is only actually really there by consent. So this leads again to the idea of democracy, and liberal thinkers talk about a social contract. And this then will lead to essentially the government is only there because the people consent to have it there. And the government therefore will be to a degree limited. It will be constrained by some kind of constitution, and it might well be fragmented. The power of government might well be broken up to stop the ideas of tyranny or autocracy that had been seen in the kind of the pre-liberal era. So we have a state. That state has an important role, but it is there by the consent of the people. And what that state should therefore do, or other parts of the elements about that state, it should promote tolerance, a particular kind of emphasis in this early days of liberalism on the tolerance of different religious groups. It will be a meritocracy, so people will rise to the top of the state because they are good, not because of birth or things like that. And there will be equality of opportunity. Now, this is different to equality of outcome. So equality of opportunity is setting out, the state setting out a society or a set of rules or whatever it is that ensure everybody has equal chance. Now, that becomes an interesting issue of debate amongst liberals as time goes on to how you achieve that equality of opportunity and how much a state needs to do to make sure that happens. And we'll come to that in later videos when we look at different types of liberalism. So there are these different types of liberalism. You've got classical liberalism, which goes back to the 17th century through to the late 19th century. There's kind of an idea of later classical liberalism, which emerges in the mid 19th century, which starts to challenge some of the early concepts. Modern liberalism develops in the late 19th century, going through to present, and in, for example, in Britain in the early 20th century, we see these kind of modern liberalism moving into things like the birth of the welfare state, which was focusing on the idea of equality of opportunity. Another form of liberalism which has developed, and it is still very prominent in the world today, is neoliberalism, which looks particularly at the economic side of liberalism, and we see strands of that in different political parties, such as we saw it in the Conservative governments, particularly under Thatcher, and we see it in groups in America, such as the Republican Party. So we see these different types of liberalism, and these are things that we will examine in future videos in more. So this has just been kind of the very basics. What will come up, I'll go through the key themes: the human nature, the state, the economy, society. I'll do individual videos looking at those in more depth. I will do videos on the different types of liberalism. So the different forms of classical liberalism, modern liberalism, and neoliberalism, and we'll look at those in more detail. And also there will be a range of key thinkers, and they're important in terms of understanding the ideology, and also in terms of having examples to back up points in your essays when we get on to doing those. So that's what's going to be coming up. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and keep an eye out for future videos on liberalism, and then I will be moving on to socialism, conservatism, and we're also going to look at nationalism. Okay, thank you for watching. Bye for now.